Good morning. It's 8:33. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show with Austin Petersen at wakeupAmericaShow.com. All right, my next guest, making her debut appearance on the show, writes over at CounterPunch.com that Biden's marijuana reforms really aren't that impressive. Joining me now is Finesse Moreno-Rivera. She is an accomplished criminologist, a research analyst, a policy advisor, and a criminal justice data expert, and she's joining us now. Good morning, Finesse. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, Austin.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So, people who watch my show, the Wake Up America show, know that I'm a full blown hardcore libertarian and I believe in ending the war on drugs. So, when I heard that Biden was going to have some marijuana reforms, I thought, great, maybe we're going to see some actual real movement when it comes to, pardoning perhaps nonviolent offenders in the federal prison lockup. But as the details started to come out, we started to realize that this is not the reforms you're looking for. Do you want to share with us a little bit about your premise here, why Biden's reforms really aren't that impressive?
Sure. So, as we all know, presidential clemency can date all the way back to Theodore Roosevelt himself. And there are a lot of reasons why that presidents do offer pardons. And a lot of these reasons could also include voter support. But really, what Biden has done for these marijuana pardons for over 7,000 inmates is really nothing. As of right now, there is not one individual who is a federal inmate who is serving time solely on simple possession of marijuana. So, what we're seeing is that the pardons are really speaking to Biden's interest in no longer jailing individuals based off of simple possession of marijuana. But then it also really truly gleams light to the fact that he still is against full legalization of marijuana, despite 80% of the Democratic Party backing for the actual legalization.
So, it's not just a Democrat thing, too. Republicans definitely standing in the way of marijuana reform, even though states, many states, my state included, Missouri, voted to legalize recreational cannabis in the state of Missouri. Other states will follow suit. But the problem is that we have, sentencing disparities that still exist, especially at the federal level, and a lot of other blockages to us getting the kind of reform that I think, the people who watch this show and the listeners to the Wake Up America show would like to see. So, but Joe Biden has a long history of being tough on crime. He's never really been in favor of marijuana reform. I mean, would you say that, I guess, this is the question, that these reforms were really just political, maybe something in time for the midterms, but didn't achieve anything really substantive?
Absolutely. I think that, with midterms right around the corner, I think that Biden was really going for that low hanging fruit, so to speak, when it came to looking at these marijuana pardons, because again, this truly doesn't really have a real impact upon inmates who are serving federal time as of now.
Talk to us a little bit about sentencing disparities, because I know that that's still an issue that we have at the federal level. If someone, uses powdered cocaine, they get, less time than someone who uses rock cocaine, but they're really just the same substance and they're both just as addictive, right?
Absolutely. So the sentencing disparity is also linked to Biden. He has come out multiple times apologizing. I don't know if that's something that really gives any weight to affecting so many people's lives for being the one who proposed the sentencing disparity in the first place back in the 90s. Um, as we know, there has been a serious push since the beginning of this year, dating back to 2021, for there to be an equal sentencing for powder cocaine and crack cocaine. And this actually passed through the House earlier this year. However, we do have Senator Chuck Grassley in Iowa to thank for this really being kept on hold. And this is because he's completely against for it to be equal, seen as equal. Rather, he's looking more for an 18-to-1 ratio. So again, what we're seeing is this difference in sentencing, but it still really does hang on to this idea that crack cocaine is worse than powder cocaine.
If you're just tuning in to the Wake Up America show, I'm speaking to Finesse Moreno-Rivera. She's an expert in criminal justice reform and research analysis. She's worked with federal and state institutions like the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department and the Federal Bureau of Instigation. Yeah, we'll call them the Federal Bureau of Instigation is what they're called today. Finesse, we're glad to have you on the program today. In the end, what does Biden's marijuana reform actually accomplish?
Not really much of anything. One can say that those inmates who have been released or, certainly serving time, it would be great just to have one less charge on their record. It could also help them, find housing, gain employment. But overall, it really doesn't say much. And like you said, Biden does have a stint of being tough on crime. And this really was just a way to, I think, pull more voter support, especially for the younger individuals within the US. So again, I'm really disappointed to see that there really wasn't much more of an impact. If anything, what he could have done was done a rescheduling of marijuana itself. As we all know, marijuana is still a Schedule One narcotic. So if he really wanted to make a change, he could have really bumped down the scheduling for marijuana itself.
Now, Finesse, in regards to like the approach, the criminal justice approach to the war on drugs, right? Most people who are like myself, consider themselves philosophical libertarians, think that adults should be able to do as they please, provided they harm no one else. But my beef with the criminal justice approach to the war on drugs has been the actual lack of science-based evidence that goes into determining the standards for which drugs are listed in I can't remember what it's called, but essentially, the listing of certain drugs where you have marijuana up against like the most dangerous drugs like heroin and opium and things like that. How science based, as somebody who's worked with the FBI and the DC Metro Police, how science based would you say is our approach to the war on drugs in terms of like ranking the actual threats of these drugs to the public?
That's a good question, Austin. And I actually did a great piece with Blavity that's called The War on Drugs and looking at the impact for African American communities. But what we're seeing is truly a lack of scientific evidence based practices when it comes to scheduling of our drugs. And what's harmful is that once a drug is scheduled as like a Schedule One, then that means that the government has already looked at this product as not being having no medicinal value, number one, and number two, highly addictive. But because it's Scheduled One, that means that we're not allowing our scientists to go in and really dig in deep and actually provide scientific evidence that the given product or drug is actually not harmful and has more medicinal use and is more advantageous to have that to be rescheduled than not. So, unfortunately, I think that what we're seeing is our government just kind of saying, you know what, this has gotten out of control, and now we want to have a better grip on a certain drug and then just throw it in a schedule that they think is fit for the given product.
Finesse, are there any bright spots currently with the war on drugs? I mean, I know that the states are stepping up, but on the federal level, do we have any expectation that there might be some positive movements or, any kind of like bipartisan push or compromises in order to have more what I would call limited government approaches to these chemical dependency problems? Do you see anything that shows like that might give our listeners a glimmer of hope for actual reforms?
Mhm. I am seeing it, especially when it comes to drug reform policies. Fortunately, what we're starting to see within the field is a lot of more medicinal help for individuals rather than punishing them. It's more about treatment, and that is a glimmer of hope that I'm starting to see. Also, what we're starting to see are states making their own moves as well. I do know that Oregon had already started to allow for small amounts of different types of drugs such as um, psychedelics, heroin, just to kind of pilot that to see how that's going to work out for them. So, and also I believe British Columbia as well. So, what we're starting to see is states once again taking the reins and making a difference to see if making some of these drugs legal can definitely make a change and be life saving. So hopefully other states will follow in this stead of Oregon as well. And what we've seen already is states, as you've already said, Austin, who have legalized marijuana, because if the federal government isn't going to do it, then we need to take the matters into our own hands.
Finesse, there's also, and you mentioned this earlier in terms of like the sentencing disparity, there is kind of a racial element to the war on drugs, isn't there?
Absolutely. And this dates all the way back to Nixon, whenever he had said, okay, we have a war on drugs, but then also there was a racial undertone to that, and everyone knows that that there was that undertone with that, given the state of the cultural at that time when it came to the Black Panther movement, Martin Luther King Jr. So this was also definitely putting more boots on the ground when it came to law enforcement within communities of color. So that was definitely given was a negative impact for us because we were definitely under the microscope. And so we are overrepresented within the criminal justice system.
I'd love to hear that. Finesse, is there anything else that you think that our listeners should know before I let you go?
Absolutely. So I am continuing to be published through Young Voices. I can also be found on LinkedIn at Finesse Moreno-Rivera, and then also on Twitter at Finesse Moreno-Rivera, where I will be continuing to post my content.
Finesse, that was a great interview, and we certainly are grateful for your time today. Thank you for joining us on the show, and thanks for fighting for drug reform. We appreciate your efforts.
Thanks, Austin.
Thank you very much. What did you think of Finesse?